So here we are today with Style Craft Support the Maker, where each week we're going to be interviewing one of our blog stars and finding out a little bit more about them, what they've been up to and how they became designers. So our first willing victim is Jane Crowfoot, who I'm sure all of you will know. So I have so many questions for Jane, and we've had more questions come in, so I'm just going to kick off straight away. Jane, how did you actually become a designer?
It's a long, I won't bore you with the long story, but I did a degree in textile design, straight out of art. Oh, sorry. I did a foundation course and then did a degree in textile design at Winchester. And it was all by luck, really. I didn't have a big plan. I didn't want to become, I wasn't sort of from the age of 14 wanting to be a textile designer or anything. I just kind of went with what people suggested I did. I've always been like that. I'm always like, if somebody says to me, oh, you're good at that, I'll go, oh, okay, I'll go and do that. So I'm kind of, I kind of trusted other people to see things probably in my work that I didn't see. I was sure I wanted to be a fine artist, and probably a teacher is what I fancied being. So I went off to Winchester and did textiles on the advice of a tutor. And then I've been working in the yarn business for sort of 25 years maybe.
So after Winchester, what happened after Winchester?
So after Winchester, I worked as a designer because I specialised in machine knitting. So we did it on, domestic knitting machines.
Yeah.
And big sort of what they call dubier machines, which are the two-bedded machines. And at that time, there was no computer programs, although actually at Winchester we did have a computer. It was a huge, massive knitting machine. And the machine took up one room and the computers, to make the simplest ferrule, took up a whole nother room. It was just like, and you had to write one of those numbered programs. Do you remember those?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
To make a little ball go across the screen, you spent 6 hours making a computer program. So it was a bit like that. So it was all just machine knitting, and we did swatches. I didn't do fashion. So we just knitted swatches. And then what used to happen back in the 80s is that you would then have an agent who then sold those swatches on to fashion houses. So I did that when I left Winchester. I did that for a couple of years, and then in my sort of mid-20s I got a job with Rowan, and that's where sort of the hand knitting and the crochet kind of came into it from there on, really.
So we've had a couple of questions come in. Claire Humphreys Harrell and Susan Dennis wanted to know how old you were when you learnt to crochet, or who taught you to crochet.
It was my mum's not at all crafty, and my grandmother wasn't either. It was actually my great grandmother who was the crocheter. She always crocheted. She was taught to crochet as a child, I think, but she was 98 when she died, so she was an old lady, and she learnt to make a granny square when she was 75. And she used to just, as a child, I just remember going over there and she'd have them laid out on her lap, sort of putting them together and working out what colours would go where. And I just remember being, sort of blown over by this whole sort of colour thing. And I asked my aunt about it, and she subsequently, and she said, Nana had a real love of yarn and a real love of colour. Yeah. So I think that's probably where that fascination came from. But I actually learnt to crochet from McCall's 1960s book of needlecraft. Okay. And I just, because I didn't have anybody at home to help me, I just kind of winged it. Winging it comes into it a lot with me. I'm kind of like, I fancy having a go at that. And I think actually that's probably quite a good thing, because for me there was nobody saying to me, oh, it's really hard, or you have to do it like this, or you have to do it like that. I just kind of picked up a book, and I can't even remember where I got a hook from. I suppose I got one, I don't know, from an old stash somewhere. But I mean, hand knitting, I could hand knit as a child. I used to make sort of Doctor Who type scarves and stuff. But that again didn't really come into the mix until when I started working with Rowan. So yeah. And then the designing kind of came later. I was very much a technician more than anything else. I loved looking at how stitches worked and helping other people, teaching other people was my big thing. until I got properly into crochet more recently.
I'm pretty sure you taught me, well, I know you taught me finishing techniques, because I remember mattress stitch was a complete revelation. And I think you probably taught my son when he came to a workshop with my mother. So you taught him to knit.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember the boys coming, and I used to love teaching children as well. I used to do a lot of finishing techniques workshops. Again, that probably comes from the whole, liking the technical side of things.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So when did you start your own business, just purely doing design?
So I always when I was working with Stylecraft, I'd just say that I've never actually been employed by anybody. I've always worked sort of freelance, so I could choose who to do things with. And with Rowan, I did a lot of teaching and a lot of demonstrating. And sorry, can you just say that question again? Because I've just got a bit lost. I knew my thread and then it's completely wrong.
So when did you start your own business?
That's
designing?
Right,
yeah.
I was just, it just took me back to teaching. I was just thinking about teaching the boys to knit. Thinking, oh God, that was such a long time ago. These huge kids that now can do their own thing.
Yeah, exactly. Men. Yeah. So I mean, it must have been a very brave decision to just think, right, I'm going to leave the job and I'm just going to do this.
Yeah, it wasn't a huge, I don't remember it being a huge decision, in that it wasn't a kind of like, I'm going to stop doing that, I'm going to start doing that. The design started kind of creeping in, the crochet design. Probably around about 90, I'm trying to think, sort of 98, 99, 2000s. That's when Rowan started back introducing crochet into their magazines. And as tutors, we were asked to be able to teach, to pass on those skills needed to make the patterns in the books. So I attended a workshop to learn to crochet. I mean, I already had the basics, but I remember going along to this workshop and being told that I had to hold the hook in a certain way, and I had to do, and I was like, I think I came away with a granny square with 6 corners, hexagon, I suppose, supposed to be the square, and thinking, oh God, I hate this, because it was like, you have to hold your hook this way, and you have to, but I just sat at home and got on with it on my own again, sort of with a book or whatever. And it doesn't matter how you hold it or how you do it. It's as long as you get the stitches. And so then I just sort of started dabbling with designing. I just used to sit and make little flowers and little bits and bobs. But it was probably around about 2010 when my friend Debbie Abrahams, who's a knit designer, she does a mystery blanket club, which I know you know about.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
She does it every year. It's an amazing club. She's been doing it for probably about 15 years now. And she was saying to me, crochet alongs and knit alongs weren't all that popular back then. They were just beginning. I mean, now there's hundreds, isn't there, all the time. And it was Debbie sort of saying to me, somebody is going to do a crochet equivalent of of the knit blankets. Why don't you get out there and make it you that does it? So it's kind of like, again, it was probably somebody else saying, Jane, you need to go and do this. So 2011, I did my first crochet along. It was really scary. When I look at it now, the patterns are, really badly written, and I just kind of winged it and put it out there. Was amazed that so many people sort of trusted me, that they wanted to do it.
Oh, it was wonderful. Was it that Art Deco?
It's an Art Deco one, yeah. And I mean, they're really sought after now. People will, if there's any kits left, we did a raffle for one, the 2011 one, and we raised money for Knit for Peace, and we raised £1,000 for the kit.
You're kidding.
No, it's amazing. So if anybody's got kits out there that they want to
stick them on eBay.
Charity, it's a good money maker. But yeah, I did that for 4 years. I did a yearly club.
And when I've got your book, The Ultimate Crochet Bible, which I'm not a very good crocheter, so every time I forget what a double treble is or something like that, I reach for the book. When did you do that book? The first version?
Oh, that must have been around about the time I was doing the first crochet along. I reckon it's about 2010. Probably.
Oh, it's a brilliant book. It's a brilliant book.
Again, I mean, that was one where I was just kind of getting to grips with crochet, really. And I was, I wanted to do a homewares book with Collins and Brown. And I had all the ideas. I was going to do cushions and blankets and all sorts. And they'd already done a knitting Bible, so they wanted to do a crochet one. I think they've since done a sewing one, a macrame one, all of them. And they were looking for somebody to write the crochet Bible. And I didn't feel I was the one to do it at all, but actually I think it worked really well because I was a beginner. And because I was a beginner, it meant that, whereas other people would have put 4 steps into a technique, I was putting 10 or 11.
Yes.
So I'm saying to people, you don't have to hold your hook like this, and you don't have to worry about that. And
I think that continues with your crochet alongs that you do now. It's the step-by-step tutorials that really, really help people to get to grips with the latest project.
Yeah. I mean, I think because I learned very much on my own, I was sort of looking at a lot of sort of 30s and 40s, 50s patterns, for doilies and stuff like that when I was learning. And they're a complete foreign language, and they assume that you know exactly what you're doing. Like, they won't say, it'll just say 4 treble into gap or make 16 stitches. They won't even tell you what stitch to do. You're supposed to know what they intend you to do. So I think because I learned from patterns that were so ambiguous, it made me really keen to say, this, if you're going to do a stitch into this stitch, it needs to be a particular stitch, or it needs to, like kind of guiding people the whole way. Because there's nothing worse. We're all at home, doing these projects on our own, especially now, everybody's at home. So they need to be clear as to where people should be putting their stitches and what they should be doing. That's always been my thing, really, is to guide people.
So we've had a number of questions in. I'm just trying to see. Laura Polly is one of them, asking about what inspires you. Where do you get your inspiration from?
It's a lot of it is with me. It's about pattern and colour. I don't look at sort of natural things. I often look at wallpaper designs, postcards. I look quite a lot at textile design. I love Indian textiles. I love like Persian tiles, Persian architecture, that sort of stuff. Like, I suppose surface pattern that already exists is the thing that really gets me.
Right.
And how I can make that work in crochet.
And are you finding that you have much headspace for inspiration in the pandemic? This is a question from Suyette.
Yeah, the problem I have at the moment is because my head is still full of the fruit garden, because we're doing the fruit garden fortnightly releases, and I'm doing the videos for that. Plus getting through kind of just everyday stuff at the moment. I mean, the websites have been really busy as well. So I'm beginning to think about new stuff at the moment. I'm really slow. I don't just knock things out. I wish I could, but things take me a long time. So I'm just in the beginning phase now of a new idea for next year's my 10-year anniversary of crochet alongs.
Oh gosh.
So I'm kind of thinking it would be nice to do something for next year, but I don't know what yet.
Yeah. So when you're doing your designs, what do you start with? Do you start with a colour palette or a yarn, or?
It's always a bit different. I go to a lot of, not at the moment, but I usually go to a lot of exhibitions. I look at a lot of magazines and stuff like that. So often I find my mobile phone invaluable. I've got my phone with me all the time, and we'll just, snap pictures all the time, and, things that come up on Instagram. Pinterest is a real rabbit warren for me. I go in there and, look at colour palettes and stuff like that. So it kind of could be anything that inspires me, but it's often artists, actually.
Right.
There's Lily Pond, it's behind me, which was the Monet inspired one, and Frida was inspired by the Frida Kahlo.
Can you pull those down? Do you mind pulling those down so we can just have a quick look, if people don't remember? I love this. This
is Lily Pond. That was the first crochet along that I did with Starcraft in 2015. And the lovely thing about starting to work with Starcraft is because I've done my crochet alongs on my own for 4 years, being able to put them out as free patterns and having the support of the guys at Starcraft was just amazing, really. So this is Frida, 2016.
So beautiful.
And I love the fact that, because the patterns are out there for free, I love the fact that you know, people go through their stashes and look at different colorways and add different stitches in and all that sort of stuff. I really love that. Whereas, you know, because of the way I did the crochet alongs before, that didn't happen. It was, you know, you got a box of yarn and you made it how I intended you to.
Yes. Yes. Susan Green says, and what yarn do you prefer to design with?
That the yarn choice is often to do with my design inspiration. I don't look at the yarn first.
Right.
It's kind of like I look at the inspiration, work out a palette. I'm very lucky because I'm able to have the whole palette around me, whereas guys that are at home, you know, you can't afford to go into a shop and buy, you know, a ball of every single colour from a range.
Right.
And I think choosing palettes in shops is incredibly hard anyway, because
Yes.
when you're looking at a ball of yarn, you're looking at every ball in the same size, you know, in the same ratio as each other. So, you know, like I love adding in, I'm just looking here, like this pop of zing here, you know.
Yeah.
I really love adding in little bits of bright colour. So I think it'll be the colours in the yarn palette that draw me to a yarn. I love special, I love Life Decay, Starcroft's Life Decay, which has got a little bit of wool in it. I really love the new bamboo cotton, that sort of chalky feel on the colours.
Yes, the palette's wonderful, isn't it?
Yeah, and I like, with Starcraft, I really like the batik as well. I love how the batik has added in that sort of like a marl yarn. And tweeds, I love tweeds, but there's less and less ranges with good tweeds in.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's yarn, I suppose, is the answer to that question.
Okay. And Helen Tucker says, how do you start? Do you start with drawings to turn your ideas into crochet? Do you do sketching, or do you just pick up the hook?
A lot of the time it's picking up the hook. I make myself a kind of mood board. I usually do that sort of on Pinterest or just by photocopying pictures that I've taken, you know, just sending them to the printer.
Yeah.
For Fruit Garden, I did have, I've just got a mood board here. For Fruit Garden, this here was just the one piece of inspiration. It's a layout for an embroidery that May Morris did. And that was the main inspiration. So with Fruit Garden, I just had this in front of me, and you can maybe see from that little bit there and the leaves and that where the inspiration for the project came from. But a lot of the time it's just, honestly, just sitting with my crochet hook and making things over and over again and seeing where they take me, whether they match the kind of inspiration I found. I mean, it takes me a long, long time.
Yes, and the latest project, which is the Fruit Garden, I don't suppose you've got one of those knocking around, have you?
I have actually, hang on. They're just in front of me because I've been doing the videos.
So this launched on the 28th of April, didn't it? And every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So that little pink one, is that Forget Me Not? No, hang on, yes.
Yeah, this is Forget Me Not.
And that was the first square.
Yeah, and then they've done this one this week, which is Columbine.
Beautiful.
And then the next one that they're going to be doing is Clementine, which is based on, you know, William Morris style oranges. Yeah.
So the inspiration behind this blanket was May Morris, and there is a William Morris's daughter, and there is a video on YouTube that Facebook have shared, an interview we did, which goes into a bit more detail.
Yeah.
Can you show me the bamboo cotton one as well?
Yeah.
So that's a very different colour palette, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very different, but it's very Morris. You know, this
Yes.
kind of like, it looks a bit grey there, but it's a bluey, a really lovely chalky blue. And actually the two colourways for these came really easily. The palette for the bamboo cotton was just really easy to work with this one. Yeah. I'm currently doing another version because we're going to do another release.
Yeah.
And actually finding the second colourway is proving harder than finding this one, because straight away I just knew I wanted to use this lovely Morris blue. Yes. It was just perfect.
Now, can you hold up the acanthus for me? I think some people have started to get a little bit scared about this one.
I don't think I should show it to you then.
Actually, show it to me on that blanket, because I think that shows better on the screen.
Yeah,
there you go.
I'm just picking that one up.
Because that's not a square, is it? That's a rectangle, which is the first thing that I think people get a bit,
Yeah.
But how are you helping guide people through that motif? Because it is stunning.
Okay, so originally we thought we'd do the acanthus motif as the final motif that you made, the big finale, before you put your blanket together. But actually I realized that, I mean, it took me 6 weeks to design it, let alone then writing the patterns and getting everybody else to make it. So what we decided to do was actually break this down into really little bite-sized pieces. And I really don't want people to worry about it, because it's actually, if you break it down into pieces, like if you just look at that in front of if I block that off and you look at that bit,
that's doable.
That's the first bit that everybody's going to do. So they're just going to make 8 of those, which is, you don't need to worry about what happens next, just make 8.
was that in this? Was that in?
That's this week.
Part 2. Yeah.
And then in part 3, they're going to add. Forget about that blue there. Just look at those pink petals and that darker petal. So you're just adding a couple more rounds on, and by the time you get out here and look at those leaves and things, you'll be fine. You'll be set up ready to do those.
So it's sort of like, it's like you're doing it by stealth, really, aren't you? Before they know it,
tricking everyone. Yeah. But this is the thing that I find interesting, is there's a lot of crocheters that just will. I mean, you know, like with Lily Pond, it amazed me the number of people that emailed or spoke to me and said, I'd never crocheted before. I saw that and I needed to do it. And they just launched into it and did it. You know, there was no preconceived idea. There was just nothing. And then you get a lot of other crocheters who look at it and go, I can't do that. I won't be able to do that. And that's why I really love the idea of taking people by the hand and leading them through something that, like, I mean, that is really scary if you look at it like that. But, you know, if it's broken up into little bits, and by the time you've done this one, which is the next one, you'll understand how I've formed those leaves.
Yes.
And that's the same as I've done later on here. Yeah. And when you look at that one, for example, what you don't realise is there's a whole framework of stuff going on at the back there, in order for that to work. So it's things like that. You know, once you've done that one, you'll realise why you've then got a framework at the back of the acanthus that helps you to make things. So I think it's kind of like, you know, like it. I don't like it when people worry about it, but I know people do. But I kind of say,
I think that's the most wonderful thing about your crochet alongs, what I was saying earlier about the step-by-step photos. It must go back to your days of teaching workshops or something. It's the way you break it down, and this is Fruit Garden is an intermediate project, but actually I know that as a relatively awful crocheter that there's enough there for me to lead me through that. Do you know what I mean? And I trust you. Every part is at the right time, if you know what I mean. And it helps build skills as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I'm really keen on kind of, you know, getting people up to that next level. I mean, I love the fact that people love to make crochet blankets and granny squares and all that sort of thing. Lovely, ripple blankets, all that sort of stuff, great. But I'm really keen to get crocheters onto that next step and kind of, you know, get crochet away from the image of granny squares and 1960s ponchos.
Oh, well, your design certainly do that. I have a question here from Laura Martin. Do you sew your ends in as you go?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
I can see that halo.
I know one of my crocheters doesn't. I've got a little team of my prized crocheters, and Sue, I'm sure she won't mind me saying this. I remember her sending me an email. She'd made a blanket that I called Magic Circles, and she sent me an email and said, the blanket looks lovely now, I've got 3,450 ends to sew in.
Oh no.
She'd actually worked out that was how many ends she had to sew in. I don't know, it might have been a different number, but that, to me, that would just be like, I couldn't do that. That would spoil the project for me. So I and if you watch any of my videos for the fruit garden, you'll see that even in the videos, every 3 or 4 rounds, I've sewn my ends in.
Really?
Yeah, I can't bear it otherwise.
So going back to Fruit Garden, I'm jumping around a little bit. There are videos as well, aren't there?
Yes, I've done. Sorry, Jules.
But every part has a video?
There will be a video for every part. I was thinking that they'd actually get shorter as people kind of got to grips with it. But I think there's been a really good reaction to them. So I think I'll continue to do, they're about 40 minutes long, but, you know, they will be. and just the bits that people might struggle with, like, where I'm saying to you, you need to put your hook into the stitch at the top of the leaf. Well, exactly where is that? And
how do you find it?
Yeah, and things like, tension and sewing in and all those things that crocheters.
Yeah.
It is about, and really nice little tricks as well, like how to get a really neat ring at the beginning, how to get rid of your knots, how to join in new colours neatly, all that sort of like stuff.
That's invaluable stuff. It just takes it up a level, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So, part 2 launched this week, which was I've lost track of 12th, wasn't it?
Yeah.
12th of May.
Yeah.
Is it too late for people to join?
No, not at all. Not at all. In the first set of patterns that was a fortnight ago, they were asked to make 8 little flower motifs.
Forget-me-not, which
the forget-me-not. And then this time, which is 2 weeks on, they've been asked to make 4 columbine and 8 of those little acanthus flowers. So, I mean, especially at the moment, I've seen people getting 8 motifs done in 2 days.
Good grief.
So, like if you wanted, what's that? You've got about 16 pieces to do. So if you're, and actually it doesn't matter if you're speedy or not, people can catch up at any time. And the fact that we're doing this second release, I think that's really good, because people that kind of end up being a bit slower this time can then have the chance to catch up later.
That's in September, isn't it?
Yeah, we're going to launch again at the beginning of September.
Uh-huh.
And that was really as a reaction to all these people, that can't get yarn kits, or just are not in a position, like key workers and people that are not in a position to get involved at the moment. So we thought it'd be really nice to launch it again in the autumn.
With this bonus colourway.
Yeah, and have it ready for Christmas. So if you wanted to make somebody another nice Christmas present. Yes,
and a crochet along wouldn't be the same without a group.
No.
Where's the group? Is it on Facebook group?
Now you're asking me. There's the official Starcraft group.
Yes.
Which I have to admit I kind of keep away from a little bit, and that's not because I don't want to talk to everybody. It's just that I would be in there all day.
Yes.
So I kind of don't get involved.
We'll make sure we put the links up. The patterns are all free on the Starcraft website.
Yeah.
Where are your patterns available? The other patterns that you've done?
Okay, so I have a website which is just janiecrow.com. That's a design website where I have the kind of background stories to my crochet alongs and all my other little patterns. I tend to do, people that don't know what I do, I tend to do blankets and cushions and home stuff, just so that I can throw as much colour and technique and stuff as possible. And all the patterns for those are on that website, and I have a Ravelry store as well. So if people don't want physical paper patterns, they can go on Ravelry.
Okay.
We've started adding a few kits back onto the site recently, because people have been looking now. I think when a new crochet along comes along, they tend to then start looking at back stuff. So we've put some kits on there. And then my partner in crime, Andy, he's got a website called Just Knots, which we kind of run together. It's his really, but he does hooks and needles and all the other bits that you might need to go along with.
Okay. So which project, if Fruit Garden really wasn't, you just didn't feel brave enough to do it, or which would be a good project for somebody that's just starting out with crochet?
I think it depends the size of things that people want to tackle. Like I said already, it always amazes me the number of people that are prepared to launch into a huge blanket project, but it's based on them liking it. And I think probably Lily Pond is the one that, because it starts really straightforward, we did it so that you actually make just a very plain block to begin with. Can you see that there?
Yeah.
This block here, it finishes here where these join. But this is just really basic stitches.
Right.
Double crochet, trebles, and then a wave stitch.
Yes.
So some people have just made that block, just made that block and maybe done a couple of flowers.
Yes.
So you can always change it. You don't have to do the more complicated flowers.
Yeah.
So from my point of view, that is probably one of my easier ones. And the other one is Mystical Lanterns, which...
Oh, I love that.
Which is this one?
I sent you over a picture. I can't show people now. Vicky Hayday Pitts had done a temperature blanket and has asked what you think of it.
I love it.
It was wonderful, wasn't it?
It's fantastic, yeah. For people that don't know what temperature blankets are, they're done so you choose a different colour. So Vicky's one goes from red and yellow into blue and green. It's really pretty. And then she's done a black border.
Yeah.
And you just do a bit a day, I think, don't you?
Yes, it's supposed. Yes. Yeah.
So mystical lanterns, I've got one here actually that I've just been. This is in an Aran weight to see what they come up like when they're bigger. But these, when they're joined, they tessellate.
That looks really complicated to get that point, though. Is it? No.
Well, it's not for you guys because you can read my pattern. But for me, it was another one that was like, okay, so how do you make things tessellate? And you know, that curve has to match that curve. Which, when you start thinking about it, you think, well, that's easy, but actually, it's not. So a lot of the time for tessellating designs, I draw myself a paper template.
Right.
And actually crochet to the templates to make them work.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I did that with the fruit garden one as well, which is another big tessellating one. I love tessellations, but they're the ones that can just scramble your brain. So
yeah, but it's almost like engineering, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe. My daughter wouldn't agree with you there, but
well, Jane, that's the end of all of my questions, and thank you so much for taking us through your career and some of your lovely, lovely designs. And I will make sure that all the links for the groups, where the patterns are, will appear at the end of this video. I'll just stick them on the end when I come to edit it. But thank you very much. And
brilliant, lovely.
see you soon.
See you.